Welcome to Emotional Resilience, Living with the Fruit of the Spirit. I'm your host and author, Ron Ovitt. Today we're going to be in session 12, Overcoming Attachment Pain. Now we've taken a couple weeks now to talk about attachment, which really means relationships, early childhood relationships, especially in infancy, with the caregivers, the mother and the father, or whoever that might be. You know, we've talked about healthy, what the scientists call healthy, secure attachments. And I encourage you to go back and read that if you have to. That'd be wonderful. And in fact, each lesson you should read a couple times if you can, where you can really start to understand this and grasp it. Our goal is not just to figure out what's happening, but why it's happening, so we can then change it. And so we want to have that power. So we started talking about healthy, secure attachments. And then we went into, well, what are unhealthy relationships or attachments? And then we talked about the fact that could cause attachment styles, the way we relate to other people. And it can cause this, what we call attachment pain, this emotional pain. And that's what we want to kind of talk about today, and then start talking about, well, what can we do? There's hope today. What can we do about that? And so I encourage you again to read the lessons, get in a group if you're not in a group, where you can have group discussion and really start to grasp what we're talking about here. You know, there's a strong link between shame and having a non-secure or a painful childhood attachment with your parents. I have often thought of myself as a shame-based person. It's a term used for someone who goes around with a sense of shame about themselves. Now, not a shame necessarily about doing something wrong. It's more of a shame about being defective. You know, guilt is, hey, I've done something wrong. Shame is, there's something wrong with me, right? And so it's this sense of shame that I'm defective or broken, that something's wrong. And you can see where a person who feels this way can live with this constant anxiety that they need to be careful not to be exposed. You know, if you only knew me, or if you really knew, you would reject me, or if I'm not perfect, if I'm not good enough, you know, I'll be exposed. And, you know, it's one thing to feel shame, it's another thing to agree with it. And so we walk around with this anxiety and what people think about us and what we got to do to make them happy, or what we need to not do to make them unhappy. I used to walk around like there was a predator in the room, that, you know, anyone here might not like me. Even when I speak sometimes, if someone, you know, has indigestion and has a certain scowl on their face, I'll think, oh boy, what did I say? You know, so we got to work on these things, right? Well, it can result in perfectionism or people-pleasing, codependency. All those have roots in shames. Addictions, much of addiction has its root in shame. And shame is part of this attachment pain. Well, the good news is we can do something about it. Now, Patricia DeYoung has written a classic book, and it's a difficult book to get through, I'll be honest with you. It's scholarly. I've had to read it, you know, and it takes a long time, but it's a good book. And she's written, you know, a classic book on shame, calling Understanding and Treating Chronic Shame. And I just want to share a little bit with you because I think it was so well done. She says this: shame is the experience of one's felt self, of self disintegrating in relation to a dysregulating other. Now, don't worry, I'll explain that in a minute. Chronic shame develops when many repetitions of such shame experience forms a person's lifelong patterns of self-awareness and response to others. Now let me unpack that, okay? Disintegrating is referring to the sense of self. Now I remember a counselor once told me, he said, Ron, you don't believe in self-denial. You believe in self-annihilation. You don't have a self. And it was true. I mean, you know, I just had this horrible view of who I was. It was like I was a non-being. And he explained it, it's as if I felt I didn't matter. And deep in my heart, I felt I was unlovable. And Dr. DeYoung explains it this way: people report that shame makes them feel blank, vaporized, or incoherent, even to themselves. In moments of feeling humiliated, they can't speak or even think. And I've experienced that. Have you? You know, all of a sudden you've done something and someone isn't happy with it and they start telling you about it and you're sitting there feeling like you're this tall, you're just kind of melting and you don't know what to say, what to think. And that's what she's saying here. They feel shattered or as if they are falling apart. The threat of psychological annihilation is mirrored by their wish to sink through the floor or disappear, in some ways to cease to exist. Now, in terms of that dysregulating other, it refers to the caregivers, usually parents, right, who should be helping you regulate your emotions. And we often refer to the parents as a child's emotional regulator. So she is saying that instead of helping the child regulate their emotions, they do things that cause a dysregulation, you see, a non-regulating situation. And so when the baby or toddler is upset, the parent doesn't help them to become calm and safe. So that's dysregulation. Instead, they may even terrorize the child. Stop it. I told you, quit crying. Quit acting like a baby. You ever hear that one? And that's a dysregulating experience. And that causes then a disintegration of the child's self. So that's what she's talking about. And then she continues to give this example. When a child misbelieves, a parent's displeasure may bring on momentary shame and the danger of the child shattering or falling apart. In a good enough parenting scenario, and I love that term, good enough. In a good enough parenting scenario, the disciplinary point is made, followed quickly by a return to relational connection, within which the child's self-experience returns then to coherence, an internal sense of, I did a bad thing, but it's over and I'm still a good kid. This sort of small break and repair, or what they call rupture and repair, helps a child integrate emotionally a felt sense of goodness and badness and builds implicit relational knowing about how to be a successful self in social connection and negotiation with others. And that's our goal, right? By contrast, though, moments that might eventually turn into lasting damage and chronic shame are disintegrating moments that remain unrepaired, you see. And the child is left struggling alone to recover a sense of who he or she is with the other. Without help, the disintegration persists and the child may just blank out the whole experience in order to move on. Yet, a certain kind of implicit knowing about how relationship works and doesn't work has been laid down. And that's important. That implicit knowing means it's out of our awareness, but we really know. And we react without knowing that we know. and it's something else, it really can cause a problem. But you know what? There's hope today. And God can heal our woundedness. And it may have been painful to listen to what I've just shared for the last few minutes if you've experienced it like I have. But that's okay. There's hope today. There's hope. God can heal our woundedness. Relationships, new relationships can help heal our woundedness. God created us with the ability to change. We can loosen the grip that shame has on us. It's through the plasticity of the brain. God has given us the ability to use His Word, the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, His reparenting us, and relationships with others to transform our mind. And so, adult attachment relationships, healthy adult attachment relationships, allow us to build the capacity for peace and joy. Attachment is that right brain phenomena. It's knowing that you are happy to be with me. It's feeling that I'm okay, safe and secure. And I come to know that through this right brain, right? Nonverbal communication. Communication through the eyes and through the tone of voice and sincere touch and facial expression. And the mirror neurons pick this up. And we're going to be talking today and then in the next one about what can we do that creates this kind of healthy environment for us to grow in. How can we minister to others and they minister us so all of us, right, all of us become more healthy emotionally. Well, first of all, a healthy relationship or attachment relationship is a reparative relationship. Part of a healthy attachment is the ability to be resilient, to bounce back. And this comes because there is a person to whom you've had a reparative relationship. When the relationship ruptures, this kind of relation can help repair it. Dr. Harville Hendrix and Dr. Helen Hunt, the authors of Receiving Love, writes this: you know you are involved in a reparative relationship if you are better able to experience a wider range of emotions and more able to tolerate stress than before. To achieve this healthy emotional resilience, a reparative relationship will spur you to become adept at certain specific skills that your brain has not been stimulated to develop until now. If you are fortunate enough to participate in a relationship like this, even if you've always been emotionally illiterate, you can learn to do what? You can learn to put feelings into words, connect experience to meaning, identify what's triggering your anxiety, and to integrate what you're thinking with what you're feeling. And those are key things that we're going to be talking about in the weeks to come. How do we do that? How do we understand some of what we're feeling and what we're thinking, and how do we balance them, and how do we change them, right? All those skills involve connecting aspects of the self that used to be separate from each other. And moving forward can be hard if we're upset about our past. Reparative relationships can accomplish their healing magic by encouraging us to what? Explore emotions and memories in a way that encourages tolerance and acceptance, right? We get a coherent story behind us. We understand it wasn't good, it wasn't perfect, it was far from it. But at least we understand what happened, and we can move on. We can maintain trust so that new challenges of self-awareness and learning can be undertaken. And we can look at the past and say the past doesn't have to define me. I don't have to believe those lies that I believed about myself as a child, that I'm damaged goods, something wrong with me, it was all my fault. We can let go of those things and realize that happened, but now I have choices. I can move on. And that reparative relationship will help us mature. And we can interpret experience in a way that enlarges perspective and promotes self-esteem. It's sort of like a person that can go from being a pessimist to an optimist. And you know, a pessimist is a learned behavior. It's a learned attitude. And the good news is we can learn optimism. And if we can do that, we can certainly change some of the beliefs we have about ourselves from no matter what childhood we had, right? And so we need to help others. To help us get to a place where we understand that we were immature when things went wrong, and it wasn't our fault. So many people falsely believe that the things that happened to them when they were younger was their own doing. I can't tell you how many times in counseling people have told me horrific stories about their childhood and feel that it was their fault. Oh no, I was horrible. I don't blame them. I mean, you should have seen the way I was behaving, and I get it. But some of the things they're talking about, there's no excuse. And so when we can accept and realize that maybe we were a victim, then we can choose to heal, because we don't have to stay a victim. The past does not have to define us. God created us with a capacity to adapt and overcome. And that's what this is about. This is when we start to recognize our emotions, we regulate them, and eventually what? We're here to emotionally relearn. And that relearning causes all kinds of maturity and growth in us. Dr. Hunt and Hendrix finished saying this: experiencing empathy, the freedom to explore, trust, and insight can reset, now listen, can reset your default emotions. Those emotions we keep going back to, those habitual feelings, those habitual thoughts that a lot of times are totally wrong, but they're habitual. Well, experiencing empathy and healthy relationships can help reset the default emotions. There is hope today. I hope you're understanding that. And it can default emotions to what? To more curious, tolerant, and a confident stance. Because our brains have plasticity, consistently positive experiences do stimulate existing neurons to adopt and connect in different pathways. Nurturing relationships, right? Nurturing relationships help us grow psychologically and neuronally in ways that are not possible in non-nurturing relationships. It's a breakthrough to realize that the purpose of a nurturing relationship is not to be happy, but to heal. And then you'll be happy. Read that one again, will you? That is just some really profound wisdom there. And that's what we want. We want to rid ourselves of fear bonds. How? By having love bonds, by finding new people that we can relate to. And I hope that you're in a group going through this. And that group can be that kind of healing relationships. Next time we're going to talk about how do we do some of that stuff? How do we have empathy for others? How do we bond, right? And so as we grow, a lot of times we have fear bonds, and these fear bonds result from a childhood filled with emotional and physical pain, shame, humiliation, guilt, or fear of rejection, abandonment, severe consequences. Dr. Jim Wilder, who's written a lot on this, he talks about 3 kinds of fears, right? Fear of rejection, fear of anger, and of, don't be angry with me, don't reject me, and then the fear of being shamed. And the way that we overcome those is by having these new love bonds, having a new healthy attachments and healthy bonding, someone that's happy to be with you. And we can be vulnerable, free to express our feelings, share our needs, reveal our weaknesses. What a blessing when we have those kinds of relationships. We learn and mature in relationships. And what do we do? What are some of the things, the concepts that we can do and practice that helps us bond? And I want to just go through real quickly some of them, and you can look them over, and I would encourage you to read them over and maybe take that page and put it on the wall somewhere and review it. First is curiosity. Conversation can become one way, right? And instead we need to go and meet other people and listen to them with curiosity. Who are they? How wonderful are they? What can I learn about you? And so we can have this curiosity, and when we're vested in listening and looking for clues, it can give a lot of meaning to that interchange. And they light up, we light up, it helps. And this synchronization where we're paying attention, and there's synchronized swimming, right? You see how they all do the same movements at a time. Well, when we're in tune with someone, we kind of synchronize. Our facial expressions sometimes match, right? Our body posture match. Oh, I'm so sorry. If someone tells you something just tragically happened and you're really into it, you aren't back here like this. Oh, gee, I'm so sorry to hear that. No, you're leaning forward. You're looking, oh, man, you got the facial expressions because you're synchronizing with them. And that's really paying attention, isn't it? And of course, having empathy, where I deeply understand your point of view. I understand your emotional state of mind and what it means to be you in a moment. And it helps the other person feel felt. He really felt what I was experiencing. And attunement, that is where I'm in tune, right, or present with you. It can be with God, it can be with others, right? Emotionally, intuitively, cognitively, there's a sense of joy in the relationship and a mutual inner sense of connection. And then authenticity, we don't have to wear that mask. We don't have to come with pretense. We can be who we are. Now, you can't do that with everyone. I understand that. It takes time. But there are people where you can have that kind of relationship, and that kind of relationship just helps us mature. Our love for each other is relevant, real, honest, and understanding. And then being part of a community is all that, right? A community that cares. And we need to start building that. The church should be that kind of place. But so often it's not, because hurt people, right? But we want to be healing people that help people heal. we're not going to be perfect. There's no perfect people allowed here, right? But we can be healing, right? And as we heal, other people heal. And one of the big ones out of that was empathy. And I want to talk a little bit about that, right, in closing here. Empathy is key. And that empathic listening, there's different kinds of listening, right? And listening with empathy is an intently listening, tuning into their tone, their facial expressions, their feelings, and checking in with the other person to make sure that I understand what they're really feeling. It's a deliberate type of listening. It's like grabbing a flashlight, right? And you lost something behind the couch. And if you really want to find something, you turn the lights out, you get the flashlight, and then you put it behind the couch. And now that flashlight illuminates that little area and you really focus. Wherein if all the lights were on, sometimes you can't see it. And that's what it's like when we're having empathy, right? We're shining the light on that moment. We're into that moment. We can see what's going on. And that's real, true empathy. We're focusing on what and how what they're saying and how they're saying it. We're purposely caring for the other person. We're asking questions to get us a deeper understanding, right? And we'll talk about that in the next lesson. What are some of the things that we can do and we can ask? And then there's, having that attunement with others. I like what Daniel Stern says. He said, our minds are not created alone, they are co-created. Our nervous system is ready to be taught by others people's nervous system, which transforms us. No man is an island, right? Remember that song? But there's so much truth to that. We need each other. When I can be vulnerable and be who I am, and you're sitting there looking at me and saying, boy, without saying anything, I'm happy to be with you. I accept you for who you are. Oh, that just helps us become who we truly, truly are. And I like what this one author said. He said, through subtle, highly nuanced communication, we share many such moments of sublime attunement, that nonverbal, pre-explicit experience that occurs between two people as the recognition that I know that you know that I know. And boy, that's a wonderful thing. When you can know that I know that you know, that we know each other deeply, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And so it's an important part of attunement is that emotional contagion. It's something, something that is viral or contagious, right? It's someone else gets the same thing you have. And when we can have that, when we get each other, you see, when we get each other, when we're in tune with each other, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And it takes practice sometimes. It takes practice. And then what I find that really helps us get there is attuning with God. As we can attune with God, as we can start there. God loves you. He has an unconditional love for you, and you can start to attune with Him. There's a story of a baby lamb. Every once in a while, a ewe will give birth to a lamb and reject it. There's lots of reasons she may do this, but nevertheless it happens. And if the shepherd tries to return the lamb, the mother might even kick the baby away. But once the ewe rejects the lamb, she'll never change her mind. Now, these little lambs will hang their heads so low that it looks like something's wrong with their little necks. Their spirits are broken. And they call these little lambs bummer lambs. And unless the shepherd intervenes, that little lamb will die, rejected and alone. And do you know what the shepherd does? The shepherd will take the rejected lamb into their home, hand feed it, and keep it warm. They will wrap it up with blankets and hold it to its chest so the little lamb can hear the heartbeat. And once the lamb is strong enough, the shepherd will place it back in the field with the rest of the flock. The shepherd would take the rejected little lamb into their home, hand feed it, keep it warm, and then what happens? That sheep will never forget the shepherd's love and care when their mother rejected them. When the shepherd calls for the flock, guess which sheep runs first? The sheep that knows the shepherd's voice. The bummer lamb isn't loved more, it just knows intimately the one who loves it. It trusts the shepherd because it experienced the love from the shepherd. Many of us are bummer lambs, right? We're rejected, broken, but Jesus is the good shepherd. He cares for our every need and holds us close to our hearts so we can hear his heartbeat. We may be broken, but we are deeply loved by the good shepherd, our Lord Jesus Christ. I don't know who wrote that little story, but I thought it was appropriate. And you know, we're going to, not in this lesson, not the next lesson, but the lesson after, we're going to talk about attunement with God. How do we attach a better relationship with God? And I've put some scriptures in here at the end of this lesson. You know, Neil Anderson said this: it's not what I do that determines who I am, but who I am that determines what I do. And we need to start believing about ourselves what God believes about us. So I encourage you to look through the scriptures. God gives me peace. You know, God takes delight in me. I'm a citizen of heaven. And if some speak to you, take it out. You know, put it up somewhere where you can meditate on it, visualize it, know that it's true. And let's start rebuilding and start having a healthy attachment with God and with others. Next time, we'll continue this lesson.